Today I'm going to tell you 4 incredible stories in which St. John Bosco coaxes people to go to confession when they had no intention of doing so, including a man who would blaspheme regularly. You're watching The Miracles and Prophecies of St. John Bosco, a project of America Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. Once, in the middle of the night, when Don Bosco was walking from Po toward Piazza Castello, a stranger approached and asked him for money. Don Bosco welcomed the stranger in his usual friendly way. He coaxed every secret from the mouth of the stranger and showed him the consequences of his bad life choices. Then he knelt by the man's side and heard his confession on top of a parapet behind the Madama Palace, which was a lonely and dark spot because there were few street lamps. At that moment, Canon Borsarelli was crossing the immense square near the unusual scene. Because it was dark, he didn't recognize Don Bosco. The canon approached some people who were also watching, and he asked who the priest was. "It's Don Bosco," was the reply. The canon waited for Don Bosco in awe to finish hearing the stranger's confession. When that fellow left, the canon approached the good priest and accompanied him to the oratory. After that, as long as he lived, the canon remained Don Bosco's benefactor and friend. Another day, walking across the parade grounds, Don Bosco met a few scoundrels who started openly insulting him. Don Bosco responded by conversing with them in a friendly way. Shocked by his kind words and acknowledging their wrong, all but 2 of the rascals departed. The instigator, angry now, remained and continued to harass Don Bosco. Eventually, surprised by Don Bosco's calm, the instigator was tired of mistreating him and walked away. The one remaining man continued to rail against priests and religious and to say evil things about them. Don Bosco said to him, "When you speak ill of priests, you insult me, your friend. You insult me because you do not recognize me. If you recognized me, you would speak differently." The astonished fellow scrutinized Don Bosco from head to toe, trying to remember whether he had met the priest. Don Bosco continued, "I'm one of your best friends. The proof of my affection is that I do not take offense at your insulting me, and if I could do you any favor, I would gladly do it. I wish you happiness here on earth and in the next life." This speech led the man to begin speaking more respectfully. Don Bosco said to him bluntly, "Believe me, happiness cannot be found in this world unless one is at peace with God. You're so angry because you don't think of the salvation of your soul. If death came to you right this instant, you wouldn't be happy about the state of your soul." The man became first thoughtful and then emotional. Don Bosco persuaded him to go to confession. But because he hadn't gone to confession for a long time, he invited him to go at once. "I'm ready," the man replied, "but where?" "Right here," Don Bosco said. "Can we?" the man asked. "Of course we can," Don Bosco affirmed. They had been walking while they talked. They were still on the parade ground, and they had reached a spot where several trees provided seclusion. There, Don Bosco heard that poor man's confession. Beside himself with happiness, the man could no longer detach himself from Don Bosco, who had helped him find such peace of soul. Don Bosco used public coaches for his journeys and enjoyed talking with the coachman. He always had great regard for the working classes. Whenever his ride was over, he always gave the coachman a little extra money beyond the agreed-upon fee, saying, "This is for you." He explained to those who couldn't understand his generosity, "I take these opportunities to give some alms to poor people and to say a few good words they need to hear so badly." Sometimes, however, the coachman charged too much for the journey, but Don Bosco always paid what they asked so that they would not resort to quarreling or blasphemy. Don Bosco did not want the Lord to be outraged. Indeed, he wanted his students to follow his example. His secretary, Don Giacomo Berto, witnessed his generosity for over 20 years. Don Bosco's charity made him well liked by the coachman and others of the working classes. Once there was a coachman who thoughtlessly let some profanity slip from his mouth. Don Bosco didn't skip a beat, and he said, "What did you say? I'm sure that you utter such words without thinking. In your heart, you're not bad because your face shows that you're a good man." "You're right, replied the coachman. "It's a habit I've developed. I'm not too fond of this way of talking, but it happens when I'm not thinking about it. I regret so much that these swear words escape me, especially when I'm with priests." "Try to correct yourself," Don Bosco advised him. "Yes, I want to. I do," the coachman repeated. But there were new profanities after a while because of a hitch or a quirk with the horse. Don Bosco would just look at him. The coachman, still confused, listened attentively to what the good priest told him about God's goodness and chastisements, especially about the importance of changing one's ways and saving one's soul. The priest always ended his teaching with an invitation to confession. He urged them so effectively that the coachman always surrendered. Many even made their confessions from their seats as they drove the coach. Others confessed while fresh horses were hitched in the stables or inns. One day, Don Bosco was going to Carignano and was talking with the coachman as usual. Among other topics, Don Bosco asked the man, "Have you already carried out your Easter duty to confess?" "Not yet," the man said. "It's been a long time since I've gone to confession. I would gladly confess to the priest I made my last confession to, if I could find him." He didn't realize it, but he made that last confession to Don Bosco in the prison of Turin. However, the coachman didn't recognize him at that moment, and Don Bosco no longer remembered him either. Don Bosco continued questioning him. "Who is the priest to whom you would be happy to confess? What's his name?" "Don Bosco. I don't know if you know him," the man said. "Know him? I am Don Bosco." The coachman stared at him, recalled that confession, and recognized Don Bosco. Happily, he exclaimed, "But how can I confess now?" "Give me the reins and get on your knees," Don Bosco said. The coachman instantly obeyed and confessed his sins as the horse slowly proceeded. Our last confession story was often told by Don Bosco himself. He said, "I heard the coachman blaspheme whenever he lashed the horses. I then asked him to let me ride with him. He was willing, so I sat by his side. Then I began to say to him, 'I would like a favor from you.' He interrupted me by saying, 'Do you want to get to Turin soon? Good, so do I.' And he began to lash the horses with renewed vigor and cursed between every lash. 'This isn't what I want,' I said. 'It matters little to me whether I arrive in Turin a quarter of an hour earlier or a quarter of an hour later. What I want is that you don't blaspheme anymore. Do you promise me that?' 'Oh, if it's only this, rest assured that I won't blaspheme anymore. And I'm a man of my word,' the coachman replied. 'Well, what do you want as a reward if you do this?' Don Bosco asked. Nothing,' the man replied. 'I shouldn't be blaspheming anyway.' I insisted, and finally the coachman demanded the gratuity of 4 soldi. I promised him 20. Then the coachman lashed the horses again, and out came another curse. I warned him, and he said, 'Oh, what a beast I am! I've lost my head.' 'Don't grieve over this,' I added. 'I'll still give you the 20 soldi, but every time you swear, the money will go down by 4 soldi.' 'All right,' he replied. 'Rest assured, I will earn it all.' After a time, the horses slowed, so the coachman lashed them, and out came another blasphemy. 16 soldi, my friend,' I said to him. The poor man was truly ashamed, and he said, 'It's such a bad habit. I must overcome it.' And he continued to mutter regretfully. After another stretch of road, he lashed the horses and uttered 2 more profanities. 8, my friend,' I warned him. 'We are down to 8 soldi.' 'Impossible!' cried the man in a huff. 'Evil habits are so bad and harmful. I'm disheartened. Am I no longer master of myself? Besides, this accursed habit has already made me lose 12 soldi.' 'You mustn't grieve for so little, but rather for the harm you do to your soul,' I said. He answered, 'It's true, I do great evil, but on Saturday I want to go to confession. Are you from Turin?' 'Yes,' I said. 'I'm from the oratory of St. Francis de Sales.' 'Good,' he replied. 'I want to go to you for confession. What's your name, Father?' 'Don Bosco,' I replied. 'All right, we shall see each other again.' And he uttered only 1 more blasphemy all the way to Turin. Therefore, I owed him only 4 soldi, but I made him accept 20 for making such an effort not to swear. I returned home and waited for him week after week. The coachman finally came 4 Saturdays later. I saw him mingling with the young men, but didn't recognize him at first. When his turn came, he said, "Don't you know me? I'm your coachman. I want you to know that in the past few days, in an instant of carelessness, I blasphemed the holy name of God, but then I never blasphemed again. I put myself on bread and water whenever I uttered a blasphemy. I have had to do that only once, and I do not want to go back to consuming just bread and water ever again." Through the years, many people recounted their beautiful encounters with Don Bosco to Father Michael Rua, and they were still grateful to the priest who had put them back in God's grace. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you'd like to hear all the stories that you really need to hear about St. John Bosco, please click on the playlist that I've put on the screen. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you.